So, a couple of things to go through. Firstly, I want to give a shout out to R and K, two individuals who I recently had the honour of witnessing starting their life together as man and wife. I wish you nothing but happiness from the bottom of my heart. Secondly, this video comes with a strong warning. This case is intense, seriously. I'm going to speak about animal abuse, specifically the death of a kitten. I know this is too much for some people, so please click off now if this will distress you. Lastly, I was reluctant to cover this case because it involves a transgender perpetrator, and as shown by the comments on my last video, which referenced the trans community, it seems I cannot do right for doing wrong, and however respectful I try to be, someone seems to get offended. However, I'm not going to let that stand in the way of telling a story which, despite how disturbing it is, flew under the radar. I'll use female pronouns to refer to the two main people mentioned in this video, as this is how they identify themselves, but I will also mention their biological gender, but for very good reason. So please, just focus on the case as a whole, and not this one issue. Anyway, on with the video. On Monday the 26th of July 2021, the body of a 30-year-old man called Jorge Martin Carreno was pulled out of the river Cherwell in Oxford. It was initially thought he'd simply fallen in whilst drunk and drowned, but he had been murdered. He was last seen in the early hours of the previous day, drunk, walking alone around the city of Oxford, trying to make his way home after a night out. Whilst he was sitting down, he was approached by a stranger, who lightly offered him help. Jorge no doubt was thankful for the presence of this good Samaritan, and they began walking together. He had no idea that he had just met his killer, someone who had been combing the streets looking for a victim. This individual was Scarlet Blake, a psychopathic killer who only months before had filmed herself killing and dismembering a kitten before putting its body in a blender, emulating her idol, Luka Magnotta. Welcome to Evil Among Us. There are a few facts known about Scarlet Blake, with her statements in court being the main source of information about her childhood. Given that she's clearly a pathological liar and someone who likes to portray herself as a victim, how much of what she says is true is unknown. In terms of what can be verified, Scarlet Blake was born on the 18th of February 1998 in China, the only child of Fang and Henry Chen. Scarlet was born male, but from around the age of 12 years old began dressing and living as a girl. This was 3 years after she came to the UK with her mother Fang, who studied medicine, becoming a highly respected cardiac surgeon. Henry, Scarlet's father, who was also a doctor, apparently stayed in China. How frequently he came to the UK, if ever, is unknown. Fang and Scarlet lived in a bungalow in Crotch Crescent in the Marston area of Oxford, around 2 miles from the city centre. According to Scarlet, her coming out as transgender created a rift between her and her parents, and she clearly resented them. But neighbours tell things differently. They report that Fang was a polite, kind and compassionate woman who doted on Scarlet, who's described as being a perfectly well-behaved but quiet child. She attended Cherwell School and was bullied by the other pupils, apparently because she was trans, and ended up dropping out when she was around 17 years old. During school, she was known as Alice Wang, and this was one of at least 6 names she went by, including Candy, before finally settling on the name Scarlet Blake. As to her transition, it appears that Scarlet began receiving hormone blockers when she was 18 years old, but didn't undergo any surgery, and so was biologically male, which I'll return to later in the profile section. As we'll get to, in court, Scarlet Blake made some truly strange claims about her mental health, which have no basis in reality. But it does appear that as a teenager, police were called to the family home, apparently due to her self-harming, so there were indicators of depression from a young age. Scarlet Blake as a child was described as an intelligent, articulate individual who appeared to have had a bright future, but after dropping out of school, she descended into a world of sex, drugs, drinking and violence. This included acts of strangulation towards her sexual partners, but also discussing her warped fantasies about rape and murder with another depraved, dangerous individual, half a world away. Between dropping out of school at the age of 17 years old and her arrest at the age of 25, Scarlet Blake was obsessed with sex and violence. This consumed her life, and she would frequently scour the internet looking for men to have one-night stands with, but these were not normal encounters. Scarlet appears to have been fixated with dominating her sexual partners. Videos were later recovered of her strangling people during sex, often with a leopard print dressing gown cord. These are, in reports, described as consensual sexual encounters, but I don't agree with this. Consent suggests some sort of mutual understanding, some level of mutual respect, but Scarlet didn't care about anyone but herself. Others were just things to use and abuse. It's clear based on what she went on to do that she got off on the violence, on having complete power over another human being, and this is linked to her fixation with serial killers and mass murderers, those who wielded this power again and again and again. They're posting montages of these people online, using several usernames, including Bloodmoth. These were just part of her disturbing posts, showing her fixation with violence. Scarlet would trawl the deepest and darkest parts of the internet, viewing violent pornography and posting on message boards about her fantasies about rape and strangulation in particular. In around March or April 2020, during the first COVID lockdown, so around 16 months before the murder, Scarlet was frequently on Gore message boards and began communicating with a transgender woman called Ashlyn Bell, who lived in Colorado in the US. This was the meeting of two evil, depraved minds. Ashlyn, going by the name Murder Mutt, seemed as twisted as Scarlet. Ashlyn was apparently a sex worker and a gun enthusiast. Oh, and she had a collection of Nazi memorabilia. The pair soon began an online quote-unquote relationship, which involved sharing their depraved sexual fantasies, which always involved acts of extreme violence. These sickos brought out the worst in each other. They discussed sexual violence repeatedly. On one occasion, when Ashlyn was wearing a particular outfit, Scarlet said, quote, "I'd rape you in that, but just put a rope around your neck and choke you first. Good luck fighting back while you're unconscious. Keep you in that twilight where you can do nothing as your body twitches." With regards to the topic of murder, Scarlet sent disturbing messages such as, quote, "I was super homicidal earlier. It would have been super nice to kill for you. I would murder my mum for you. I also want to kill my dad one day. And, fuck, I need blood. This is bad." Ashlyn apparently wanted Scarlet's help to live out her own sick fantasies, as shown by this deranged conversation. So Ashlyn begins by stating, quote, "When I visit, can you help me get my first kill? You will give me the courage and help me." The response from Scarlet is, "Yes, my love, I would love to be there with you." Ashlyn says, "Can I be the one to finish them? I want my first blood." "Of course you can," says Scarlet. After they pass out, "I want to make out over their corpse," says Ashlyn. Scarlet says, "That would be hot." Both of these monsters had another shared obsession, and that was the Canadian killer Luka Magnotta, who in 2012 murdered a man called Jun Lin, and then filmed himself dismembering his body before releasing it on the internet. This was after he posted videos of him killing cats, with him always hiding his face. I covered this case in depth in a previous video, and will link to that below. The investigation by internet sleuths, and later the police, to identify this depraved animal abuser was made into a documentary called Don't Fuck With Cats, released in 2019. Whereas most people watching it were appalled with the descriptions of the crimes of Luka Magnotta, both Scarlet and Ashlyn were turned on. His acts were not to be condemned, they were something to aspire to. It appears the pair did meet in person, either in the UK or the US, and God knows what they got up to when they were in each other's company. But it was an act of barbarity, streamed over the internet, around a year after Scarlet and Ashlyn began communicating, which would illustrate their shared level of absolute depravity, but specifically, demonstrate the escalation of Scarlet on her road to becoming a killer. The warning from the beginning of the video needs to be reiterated. as in this section I'm going to talk about extremely graphic animal abuse. I've chaptered around this, so please skip forward if this will distress you. So it's clear that by March 2021, 4 months before the murder, Scarlet Blake wanted to turn her murderous fantasies into reality. And like other fledgling serial killers, she began with abusing animals. But this wasn't something that she tried to hide. This was something she wanted to broadcast. She wanted her sick partner Ashlyn Bell, half a world away in Colorado, to watch and applaud, with them both getting off on the violence, the suffering of the poor animal. Scarlet decided on the neighbour's kitten, prepared for what she was going to do by buying cat food and a cat carrier. In her room, she set up lights on a tripod, ready for the performance. She also assembled knives and a scalpel. The cat food was put inside the cat carrier, and the door slammed shut behind the kitten when it walked in. What was shot next was so graphic that a censored version was shown to the jury, but I feel so sorry for the detectives who had to watch the full thing, which went on for 20 minutes. A description of what was recorded was outlined in court, and a transcript exists of some of what was said by Scarlet, who was narrating what she was doing, and Ashlyn, who was watching and commenting. So in the video, Scarlet says, quote, "Here you go, my little friend. Oh boy, you smell like shit. I can't wait to put you in a blender." She then suspended the kitten in midair, using a ligature made from a ribbon, strangling it. But she made sure the cat didn't die. Whilst this poor animal was still alive, she cut it open and began removing its organs. The cat screaming every second of this ordeal. She's heard to say, quote, "My hands are shaking. I fucking love it. Look at that little bastard. I'm pretty sure he's still alive." A very short snippet from the video of Scarlet speaking has been released, and I'll play this for you now.
Well, one day I want to learn how to do this to a person.
Scarlet went on to stab the cat in the heart before cutting this organ out, leading to it dying. Then she poked out the kitten's eyes with a scalpel, skinned it and decapitated it, holding the severed head up to the camera, before putting the mutilated body of the cat in a blender. All through the video, Scarlet had a smile plastered across her face, and is reported to have laughed a total of 29 times. Ashlyn Bell was heard to say, quote, "This is the best Valentine's ever. I've got my stimulus." I'm unsure why she says Valentine's, as it appears the video was shot in March. It was clear that this was, in part, a homage to notorious cat killer Luka Magnotta. Ashlyn says, quote, "You know he started out killing cats, right?" As if to remove any doubt about this point, in the background, the track True Faith by New Order was playing, the same music which accompanied the clip of Magnotta dismembering the body of Jin Lin. But killing cat was only practice, and Scarlet wanted to kill a human being. It's clear that Scarlet spent the next 4 months devising her plan. She decided to target a drunk man. It didn't matter who. People were just pieces of meat. Scarlet lightly engaged in reconnaissance, walking the streets of central Oxford late at night and in the early hours of the morning, mapping out her hunting ground. This also included selecting an area without CCTV coverage where the actual kill would take place. By July 2021, Scarlet Blake was ready to enact her plan to begin her path to becoming a serial killer. The victim in this case, 30-year-old Jorge Martin Carreno, spent his last full day alive, Saturday the 24th of July 2021, doing what he loved, rock climbing. Something he'd not been able to do since the COVID restrictions. These had recently been relaxed, and he was intending to use his newfound freedom to the fullest. After his death, the family released the following statement, which gives you an idea of what was lost due to the murder of Jorge. Quote, "We as a family wish to pay tribute to Jorge, our beloved son and brother, an extraordinary being full of passion and kindness. Jorge was not only an exemplary child, but also an exceptional being. He was distinguished by his incredible affection, friendliness, and his ability to give himself fully to others. Jorge's innate curiosity and creativity drove him to explore, learn, and experiment tirelessly. He studied electrical engineering, where his dedication and passion were evident in every project he undertook, manifesting in a deep commitment to innovation. He dreamed of a future where he could make a difference with his skills and ambitions, aspiring to create and build a better world. His life was imbued with love for music, photography, reading and sports. He played the guitar skillfully and radiated kindness and humour among all those lucky enough to know him. Being a triplet brother, Jorge shared not only blood ties with his brothers, but was also their best friend. His friends adored him. His affable heart and sense of humour filled every space with laughter and complicity. Nothing I've read about Jorge says that he was anything but a very decent man. He was born in Spain, but ironically came to the UK for a better life. He worked in automotive logistics based at the BMW plant in Oxford and lived in Cowley, around 3 miles outside the city centre. On the evening of Saturday the 24th of July, he met up with some friends and they went out drinking in Oxford city centre, beginning at the Swan and Castle pub on Castle Street, and at 10 p.m. they moved the short distance to the Cowan Creek pub. Ironically, at 1 a.m. on Sunday the 25th of July, Jorge received a text message from a friend with a link to an article about a recent attempted murder in the area, telling him to be careful. Jorge and his friends left the Cowan Creek and tried to get into the Thirst Bar in Park End Street, but were turned away because they were too intoxicated. And so they returned to the Cowan Creek pub and stayed there until it closed at 2 a.m. At 2:09 a.m, Jorge said goodbye to his friends and then ran to catch up with some other people he knew. After speaking to them briefly, he walked in the direction of what he believed to be his home address. This would be a fatal mistake. Activity on Jorge's phone indicates he soon became disorientated and was trying to Google his way home, as well as calling people for help, but due to how late it was, no one picked up. He was alone, drunk and lost. But around the same time, his killer was making their final preparations. At 2:30 a.m, Scarlet Blake left her property in Crotch Crescent and began walking the 2 miles into Oxford city centre. She was wearing a combat jacket and boots, and also wearing a face covering. She was also wearing a backpack, which is believed to have contained a kill kit, including a homemade garrote, the leopard print dressing gown cord she used to strangle her sexual partners, and a bottle of vodka. Before leaving, she sent a picture of herself to Ashlyn Bell. When she got into town at around 3:15 a.m, Scarlet began prowling the streets around the bars and clubs, looking for lone, drunk men. She followed several, but for one reason or another, decided they were not an ideal target. At the same time, Jorge was still aimlessly wandering the streets. He couldn't seem to reach anyone, and had no way to pay for a taxi, as he'd been caught on CCTV dropping his wallet. By this point, the streets were almost deserted, and likely due to frustration, intoxication, and exhaustion, he stopped and sat down at All Souls College, which is just off the High Street. This is one of those sliding doors moments. Had Jorge continued walking, he may have survived, but unfortunately, he stayed sitting for 11 minutes, and this eerie footage shows the moment that he was spotted by Scarlet Blake as she continued her search for a victim down the High Street. She approached Jorge and spoke to him for around 15 minutes. What was said, we'll never know. Maybe it was an offer of help. Maybe it was the promise of more booze. But I imagine that Jorge found the soft features of Scarlet disarming, and the pair headed off together, with this final walk being captured on CCTV. The route was not arbitrary. Scarlet was leading her prey with purpose, and the last images of Jorge alive were captured at 4:27 a.m. as they walked towards Marston Cycle Path, and then into Parsons Pleasure, a stretch of grass embankment leading down to the River Cherwell, which is popular with walkers during the day, but at night is a secluded and isolated location with no CCTV coverage. Jorge's phone last registered at 5:08 AM at the water's edge. It's within minutes of this that he was attacked. What happened next will never be known for sure, but the police believe that Jorge was likely hit on the head with a bottle of vodka and then strangled by Scarlet into unconsciousness using either her bare hands or, more likely, the dressing gown cord. Whilst this was going on, it's clear that Jorge fought for his life. When he was unconscious, Scarlet pushed Jorge into the water and he drowned. Scarlet Blake then left the area and returned home. She must have been buzzing. She no doubt thought that she'd committed the perfect murder, and it's inevitable, had she gotten away with it, she would have become a serial killer. Just after midday, on Monday the 26th of July 2021, a man called Craig, who was an amateur nature photographer, was on the banks of the River Cherwell at Parsons Pleasure when he noticed a bag floating in the water just out of his reach. He got a branch and knelt down to try and snag it, and his eyes noticed what appeared to be a pair of shoes just below the water's surface. When his eyes adjusted more, he realised that he was looking at a body lying face down in the river. He called over some passers-by to make sure of what he was seeing, and the police were called. When they arrived, they retrieved the body, and it was quickly identified as a local man, 30-year-old Jorge Martin Carreno. Thames Valley Police began an investigation, but initially they had little to go on. They released a CCTV image of a person who apparently interacted with Jorge, asking them to come forward as a witness. The identity of this person, the killer, would not be known for another 2 years. In May 2022, the coroner's inquest into the death of Jorge failed to reach a specific conclusion. They determined that he drowned and had alcohol in his system, but there were concerning elements to this case, including bruising to Jorge's head, shoulder, back and neck. It could have been that he was drunk, fell, injured himself, and ended up drowning in the river, or he was attacked and pushed in. There wasn't enough evidence to say either way. Jorge's family were convinced something was wrong, and they begged the police to continue investigating, but without any further evidence or witnesses, the case soon went cold. Scarlet Blake would have been following the case with interest. With each article saying there were no leads, she would have felt invincible. She would never be caught. She'd committed the perfect murder. From day one, she'd been revelling in her crime, sending messages to her equally depraved partner Ashlyn Bell, including links to articles about Jorge's death and saying she was responsible. Scarlet also sent pictures of herself standing next to flowers left by Jorge's family as a memorial to their loved one a few days after his death was confirmed. Photos she had taken standing at the exact spot where Jorge was killed and pushed into the river were also discovered. Showing just how sick and twisted the pair were, Scarlet sent Ashlyn the jacket she was wearing when she killed Jorge, and Ashlyn was elated by this gift, telling Scarlet that it had a quote, serial killer mask. Scarlet Blake could have very well gotten away with the murder of Jorge, but she had to brag. There was no point in ending a man's life if she couldn't get credit for it, and it would be her own hubris which would be her downfall, and she would be betrayed by the person that she shared all of her darkest, sickest fancies and deeds with. The case of Jorge Carreno may have never been solved had it not been for a completely unrelated incident that occurred in early 2023. However, we need to go back a few months from this and talk about the lead up to the downfall of Scarlet Blake. Scarlet had, around the end of 2022, apparently started a new relationship with someone called Evie Brockman, who also lived in America, specifically Florida, with the pair having met on the internet. To Evie, Scarlet could not help but brag about what she'd done, as well as imply that she would do it again. On one occasion, a drunk male was in Scarlet's room, and she sent a photo of the back of this man's head to Evie, with the following message, quote, "Bitch, I kill people because my lover said it would be hot. Last time I found someone this drunk, they died." A follow-up message said that this man had left apparently unharmed, with no idea that he'd just left the room of a depraved, wannabe serial killer. At the end of 2022, Scarlet went to live with Evie in Florida for approximately 3 months, and it's clear that indulging her depraved sexual urges was central to the relationship, with videos later being found of Evie being strangled with a rope, apparently as part of sex acts. But as we'll come back to, it's clear that Evie was terrified of Scarlet, and seems to have gone along with this through fear. At some point during Scarlet's time in America, her and Evie went to visit Ashlyn Bell, her former partner in Colorado. Why is unclear, but one article I read suggests a very sinister reason for this, and I think they're onto something. They suggest, and I agree, that Evie was taken as a present for Ashlyn, someone she and Scarlet could kill together. But something went wrong. There was an incident where, according to Scarlet, a fight broke out, and she received a broken rib, courtesy of Ashlyn. Scarlet then apparently held Ashlyn at gunpoint to stop the assault, and almost immediately after this, Scarlet and Evie returned to the UK. In April 2023, so approximately 3 months after the incident in Colorado, Ashlyn Bell made a call to police in the UK, stating that she could identify the person in the CCTV footage the detectives knew was linked in some way to the death of Jorge Carreno, and she confirmed that his death was not an accident, he had been murdered. Officers from Thames Bay Police flew to Colorado to interview Ashlyn Bell, and they were told everything, including Scarlett's confession to the murder, her sick obsession with violence and death, and the fact that she killed a cat, replicating the actions of Luka Magnotta. Ashlyn also gave the jacket that she'd been sent by Scarlett, the one that had been worn during the murder. I'll circle back to Ashlyn Bell later, but at this point we need to question why she made the call to the police. I cannot in any way, shape or form believe this was to give Jorge's family justice or to stop further killings. We need to remember that Ashlyn is a disgusting, depraved individual in her own right, someone obsessed with Nazism, who had spoken at length about murder and rape with Scarlett, and had watched her kill and mutilate a helpless cat. I just need to point out that Ashlyn, like Scarlett, had not had any surgery, and so had male genitalia, and this would explain why, when the jacket was tested, it was found to be covered in semen. So, as if to epitomise how sick and twisted this creature is, Ashlyn had clearly been masturbating over this memento of murder again and again and again. I think this was solely about revenge. Ashlyn, perhaps because of the incident in Colorado, or something else after this point, had decided to shop Scarlett to the police to get her own back. I cannot see anywhere that Ashlyn Bell was arrested or prosecuted for any part in this horrific case. At the very least, I would pray that UK police made their counterparts in Colorado aware of how dangerous and depraved this individual is. Sorry, but I think that Ashlyn Bell should have been arrested for, at the very least, assisting an offender. She knew Scarlett was dangerous and had killed someone, and did nothing about this for 2 years. Anyway, after a few months of further investigation, detectives from Thames Bay Police decided they had enough to make an arrest for the murder of Jorge Carreno, and on Wednesday the 9th of August 2023, 2 years after his death, the handcuffs were finally slapped on the wrists of Scarlet Blake. This body cam footage shows part of the arrest and her nonchalant attitude despite the seriousness of the allegations she was facing.
They can do that. So what we've got here is we've got a healthcare professional, so basically a nurse at custody. If you're, for instance, you need nicotine, then I think they've got those.
Nice, but I know they used to, but I think they stopped that. Yeah, double check. But for some reason, I was saying they stopped.
This is one police station being worked through.
It's not too bad. It's going to be grumpy for a while, which is annoying, but I suppose, I don't know, it's, because like being arrested and also withdrawals.
All at the same time.
Yeah, it's not a great concoction, is it?
Could be worse though. At least it's not genocide.
Scarlett's home was searched, and the police found boots and a backpack matching those worn by the person in the CCTV that they'd been trying to trace. They also found scalpels, parts of a blender, and a homemade garrote. Electronic devices were also taken and analysed. The contents of these would shock even the most hardened detectives. At the point of arrest, Scarlett was still living with Evie Brockman, and police recovered evidence to indicate that she was terrified of Scarlett. They discovered a video of Evie crying while talking about her fears that Scarlett would kill her, with her saying, quote, "I don't think I've ever been this scared of her. I don't know what I'm supposed to fucking do. She's probably going to try and kill me. I guess if anyone actually ever finds this, it was her. If nobody finds this, I'm okay." What specifically Scarlett had done to make Evie fear for her life is unknown, but I imagine it was a myriad of things. No doubt Scarlett wanted to kill again. I think Evie was likely going to be her next victim. Why she didn't kill her is unclear. Maybe she was in the planning stages when she was caught. Evie was helped to return to America by the police, and it appears that she didn't give a statement, and her name doesn't appear again. In an interview, Scarlet Blake responded no comment to all questions put to her. However, as if to exemplify how fucked up this person is, she told police that she sometimes identified as a cat and had a microchip in her chest, like domestic cats do. The police obtained a device to scan for microchips, and to their shock, they found that Scarlett was telling the truth, and she said that her details had been logged online on an animal database. I mean, what the actual fuck? Where did this microchip come from? Who implanted it? I mean, what the fuck is wrong with people? Regardless of Scarlett's silence, she was charged with the murder of Jorge Carreno. She was remanded into prison to finally face justice. As well as being charged with the murder of Jorge Carreno, based on evidence the police have been able to recover, Scarlet Blake was charged with criminal damage and causing unnecessary cruelty to a protected animal related to her killing and mutilating the kitten that belonged to her neighbours. I'll come back to this later, but I needed to highlight it as these offences are mentioned in the sentencing, which I'll play in a bit. However, what sticks in my throat is the fact that the criminal damage charge appears to actually relate to the killing of the kitten, so essentially it was considered the property of her neighbours, and its death was considered damage of that property. That's fucked up. Anyway, Scarlett pleaded guilty to the charges related to the kitten, but pleaded not guilty to the murder of Jorge Carreno, and so there was a trial at Oxford Crown Court, which began on Wednesday the 7th of February 2024. The Crown's case was strong. Whilst there was no direct forensic evidence linking Scarlet Blake to the murder of Jorge, they had a mountain of circumstantial evidence. They had Scarlett being the last person seen with Jorge whilst he was alive, her confession to the killing, and a clear morbid fascination with his death, including being photographed at the scene where flowers had been laid in his memory. However, there was more crucial evidence, including Scarlett being photographed at the spot where Jorge's body was found, something that had not been disclosed to the public, and which could only have been known by someone who was there at the time. The results of the post-mortem had also been revisited, and it was determined that Jorge had likely been strangled before he fell or was pushed into the water. The video of Scarlett killing the kitten, a censored version of which was showed to the jury, enabled the prosecution to portray her as what she was, an extremely dangerous predator, someone who had a thirst for murder, who had ended the life of a defenceless animal as practice for her ultimate goal of taking a human life. In her defence, Scarlett gave evidence during the trial, and I wish I'd been there, as she tied herself in knots and demonstrated how unstable and deranged she truly is. For example, when asked about a message that she'd sent to Ashlyn about wanting to rape and strangle her, Scarlett told the court, quote, "We are both into it. It would be a role-playing scenario. There wouldn't be actual death. This is a fantasy for sexual gratification." She continued, "I have no idea if that's how it would actually work, but it sounded hot, so I said it. For her, I assume it would be sexually arousing, which is why I said it, but for me, not much. It was for her reciprocation." This was despite the jury being shown multiple videos of Scarlett strangling her sexual partners during sex. With regards to killing the cat, Scarlett again claimed that she'd done this only to please Ashlyn because it would sexually arouse her, with her saying, quote, "It was to make her happy, something she wanted me to do, so I pretended to enjoy it." it came to a situation where I felt like I wasn't able to refuse that request. It's something I very much didn't want, so I suppose I emotionally distanced myself from the animal to be able to do it. Bizarrely, Scarlet claimed that in fact she loved animals and hated animal abusers. This was despite the fact the jury was shown the video which depicted Scarlet grinning like a prick and laughing repeatedly, clearly enjoying herself, whilst torturing and killing a defenceless animal. As to her relationship with Ashlyn Bell generally, and why she'd contacted her in the first place, Scarlet bizarrely claimed that she identified Ashlyn as a deranged individual and had spoken to her with the hope that one day she would kill her, as she'd suffered years of mental health problems and wanted a way out. I mean, none of this made any sense. Despite overwhelming evidence of her depravity, Scarlet Blake was trying to portray herself as a poor little lamb. She didn't want to do these things, and in fact, she'd contacted Ashlyn with the hope that she would kill her, but she'd manipulated her into doing horrible things, although she had nothing to do with killing Jorge. Yes, she'd been the last person known to have seen him when he was alive, confessed to killing him, and was clearly obsessed with his death, but when she left him, he was completely fine. Her claim she'd murdered him, like killing the cat, was simply to sexually arouse Ashlyn. In a moment of pure insanity, Scarlet tried to explain what goes on in her head, claiming that she suffered from dissociative identity disorder, which is more commonly known as multiple personality disorder, but she used the analogy of a pie chart to illustrate there were multiple identities all competing in her head. There was Blood Moth, the name she used online, who was drawn to blood like a moth to a flame, but there was also apparently a cat, which would come out if she was happy, and she would meow at people. She even demonstrated this to the jury by meowing at them. Scarlet, on the stand to sell her bullshit, referred to herself as us and we on multiple occasions, despite apparently never having done this before. Scarlet also claimed to regularly sleepwalk and also described having dissociative amnesia. None of this was backed up by any medical evidence and was clearly total and utter bullshit, but I can see exactly what Scarlet was doing, and I imagine she was a defence barrister's worst nightmare. What I mean by that is that she and her defence obviously had agreed a strategy: deny everything, exploit the fact there was no forensic evidence. But Scarlet was clearly laying out an insanity defence just in case the worst should happen. Even if she was found guilty of Jorge's murder, this would hopefully be on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Even if her physical body had ended his life, it was clear one of her other personalities, maybe the cat, was in control, and she herself was sleepwalking and suffering from amnesia during the relevant time. This would mean a manslaughter conviction and limited time in prison, or worst case scenario, committed to a mental hospital, where she would eventually manipulate medical professionals into releasing her. I think there was another reason for this performance, which we'll come back to later. However, all Scarlet was doing was digging her own grave, showing herself to be an unstable, pathological liar, just someone that the members of the jury could see killing a complete stranger. The defence wouldn't indulge this nonsense and didn't call any psychologists or psychiatrists to back up Scarlet's claims. As we'll circle back to, I think whilst they did their job of defending Scarlet, they were as disgusted with her as everyone else. On Friday the 23rd of February 2024, after a 3-week trial, the jury took just 6 hours to find Scarlet Blake guilty of the murder of Jorge Carreno. 3 days later, on Monday the 26th of February 2024, she was back before Mr. Justice Chamberlain, who delivered his sentencing remarks, with Scarlet standing impassively in the dock. Part of what he said included, quote, "You told the court that you didn't want to kill a living creature, let alone a person, and it was Ashlyn who pressured you to do so. You attributed your morbid interests to a split or dissociative personality, using the language of psychiatry or psychoanalysis. You adopted the persona of a cat. You talked about the difficulties you had had since transitioning in childhood to live as a woman and about your troubled relationship with your parents. All this was part of an elaborate attempt to rationalise what you'd done and shift responsibility to others. There is no evidence that you suffer from any relevant mental illness or other mental disorder. What you did is not the fault of a society that didn't accept you. It's not the fault of your parents. Whatever role Aisling Bell may have played in encouraging your interest in killing, she remained in the United States. She did not control or direct you. Even if the decision was motivated in part by a desire to please her, the decision to kill was entirely yours. In your evidence, you told the jury that you did all this to please Aisling Bell and derived no pleasure from it yourself. Apparently seriously, you invited the jury to believe that you disapprove of people who are cruel to animals. The audio we all heard and the stills and video clips we saw of you smiling and laughing whilst posing with the animal's severed head leave no doubt whatsoever that you personally enjoyed what you were doing, as well as the pleasure that Aisling Bell derived from it. Not only did you show no remorse for what you had done, you returned to the scene in the days after Jorge's body had been found to take photographs of the memorial left by his grieving family and the tree next to which you had killed him. You did so in order to burnish your credentials as a killer with Aisling Bell. You returned to the same spot more than a year later with another partner to whom you had also boasted about killing Jorge. She took a photograph of you next to the same tree. This photograph was another memento of the murder you'd committed. It reflected the pleasure you derived from your status as a murderer. The sentence was then passed. I play the recording of the part of the proceedings where Scarlet Blake learned her fate.
As you later said to another partner, you killed, quote, because my lover said it'd be hot, close quote. There was, therefore, a clear sexual motivation for the killing. You also believed that you would derive pleasure, whether sexual or not, from the experience of killing a person. I am sure that you did derive pleasure from killing Jorge, as you had from killing the cat. Fifth, you revelled in what you had done, returning at least twice to the scene to take photographs, and made conscious use of your status as a murderer to secure the admiration of others who shared your interests in harm, death, and killing. There is very little that can be said in mitigation, though I've borne in mind the fact that you were 23 years old at the time of the offence. For the offence of causing unnecessary cruelty to a protected animal, Parliament recognised in the Animal Welfare Act 2021 that the maximum sentence then available for this offence was inadequate and increased the maximum to 5 years imprisonment. This case demonstrates why the increase was necessary. If you had committed this offence after that Act came into force, I would have imposed a substantial custodial sentence. Because you committed it in March 2021, the maximum sentence available to me for the animal cruelty offence is 6 months imprisonment. Because you pleaded guilty to that offence, you're entitled to a discount of 1/4. Criminal damage is an offence against property, so the sentences available for that offence depend on the monetary value of the property. It may justifiably be thought that this is an inadequate way to mark what you did to an animal which, Mr. Siebold's statement makes clear, was a beloved family pet. The maximum sentence available in the present circumstances is 3 months imprisonment. You are again entitled to a discount of 1/4. I've reflected the criminality involved in the animal cruelty and criminal damage offences in the minimum term for murder, bearing in mind that the short determinate sentences that could have been imposed would not have been served in full. For the reasons I have given, they make hardly any difference to the minimum term, though the detail of what you did to the cat has enabled me to gain a clearer impression of the reasons why you committed murder. Scarlet Blake, stand up. For the murder of Jorge Martin Carreno, I sentence you to imprisonment for life. The minimum term will be 24 years, less the 196 days spent in custody awaiting trial. The minimum term will therefore be 23 years and 169 days. There will be concurrent terms of 4 months for causing unnecessary suffering to a protected animal and 2 months for criminal damage. The statutory surcharge applies. Go with the officer.
So, to clarify, for the murder of 30-year-old Jorge Martin Carreno, 26-year-old Scarlet Blake was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 24 years. Sentences were also passed for torturing and killing the kitten. These were 4 months and 2 months respectively. These latter spells in prison obviously pale in comparison to the main punishment. So Scarlet will be just 50 years old when she's able to apply for release. However, even her defence barrister later came out and said that she is far too dangerous to ever be back in society. I completely agree. If this monster is released, she will kill and kill again until she's locked up or put down permanently. I mean, where the hell do you start with this one? The difficulty with this case is there's a massive gap in our understanding of the development of Scarlet Blake. She came to the UK aged 9, but there's no information about her years before this in China. I think this is where the real damage was done. As I've covered so many times on this channel, people like this are almost always products of abuse. They're neglected, beaten, raped, etc. as children. This results in them developing absolutely no empathy and feelings of low self-worth and irrelevance. Violence to these people is power. It's a way to fill the emptiness inside of them. Nothing is more powerful than being in control of whether someone lives or dies. Scarlet was able to maintain the facade of normality whilst at school. This is understandable. School is routine. There's no expectations. When you're in education, you have your classes, you go to them, you come home. But when this is taken away and someone has to manage their own life, this is often when the wheels come off. And this is true with Scarlet. When she dropped out of school, she devolved into a world of sex, violence and murder, but these were all linked together. Scarlet clearly got off on dominating her sexual partners, strangling them to the point of unconsciousness, watching as they hovered between life and death, knowing that one more pull of the ligature would mean their life was extinguished. She was essentially in a position to decide whether someone lived or died. As I said earlier, I find it very odd that it's been reported that videos were found of Scarlet strangling her partners, and this was all consensual. I mean, how did they know? Did they speak to all of them? Did they know they were being filmed? I mentioned that Scarlet was biologically male, i.e. had functioning male genitalia, and this wasn't arbitrary. It's because I think this case has significant echoes of Reynard Sanaga, a man who, between 2015 and 2017, is believed to have raped or assaulted at least 206 men, almost all of them drunk, who would pick up whilst prowling the streets of Manchester. I've covered this case and will link to it below. I think it's likely that Scarlet was also a serial rapist. I'm struggling to believe that someone this obsessed with sexual violence and sex in general did not violate men they picked up off the streets in and around Oxford. And then Scarlet met Aislinn Bell, a truly depraved and disgusting individual, someone as disturbed and soulless as she was, and the pair egged each other on and justified their worst proclivities. Both shared an admiration for Luka Magnotta, and as a way to show off, Scarlet live-streamed the killing of a kitten, and she enjoyed every second of this. It's clear that killing the kitten shows Scarlet Blake that she could kill a living creature, and so she planned to take a human life, and she went on the hunt, coming across Jorge Carreno, and she murdered him. I have no doubt that Scarlet Blake would have become a serial killer, chasing that thrill, the rush, and the sexual release from murder. With regards to that last point, I also believe with certainty that Scarlet masturbated to the thought of killing Jorge, and sitting in a prison cell today, likely still revisits that night over and over again in her sick and twisted mind. However, also underpinning everything that Scarlet did was this desperate need for attention, for relevance, to be seen as unique or interesting in some way, just like her idol, Luka Magnotta. This is why she had to tell Aislinn about the murder of Jorge. I think this is also why she rambled on about all of her apparent mental health conditions in court. It made her seem interesting to people. It gave her attention, just like the bizarre shit about being a cat and even having a microchip fitted. It was a conversation starter, something to drop in, and everyone would then turn and be asking questions. They would likely be asking what the hell is wrong with you, but it didn't matter. Any attention was good attention for Scarlet, and if she needed to kill to get it, she was fine with that. I have no doubt that Scarlet does indeed have mental health issues unrelated to what she claimed in court, and is inevitably a psychopath, someone devoid of empathy and compassion for others, someone who likely doesn't believe she's done anything wrong. She's far too dangerous to ever be released. There's no fixing or managing this level of depravity and evil. So what are your thoughts on this case? If you like the content, then consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button. You can also send a one-off donation to support the channel using the thanks button. I'm working really hard to try and get the channel up to 100k subs, so please like, share and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.